In Phrygia, Sabazius was considered to be the consort, or in some cases the son, of the great mother Cybele. Nonnus says, "So Hermes, in the eternal shape of the firstborn Phanes, passed over the mountain tract with a quicker step than hers, carrying the horned child Dionysus, folded in his arms, and gave it to Rhea, Cybele, nurse of lions and father of Zeus Sabazius." In some cases, Sabazius is the father of Dionysus, and in other cases, Sabazius is Dionysus. Dionysus also has a son with Aphrodite named Priapus. Dionysus and Aphrodite entwined was called Lucifer, and Priapus is the Holy Child. Once again, another title that we see with Dionysus. Priapus was a vegetable garden protector, who some think that gnomes are related to, garden gnomes. His job was to protect gardens. Priapus is shown with a large phallus, due to Dionysian phallus being the holy and sacred symbol of the ancient mysteries and the inner mysteries. In the Orphic hymns, Priapus is also called Phanes, and Phanes is called Holy Priapus. The Orphic hymns tie a thread between the firstborn god Phanes, who comes out of the abyss unborn and has no parents, and he fathers Ouranos, heaven, Saturn, Zeus, and Dionysus, who gives birth to Priapus. The Orphics are tying these gods as one god called the Monad. The Orphic hymn to Protogonus, translated by Thomas Taylor from the 3rd century BCE, says, "To Protogonus, Phanes, fumigation from myrrh. O mighty Protogonus, first begotten, hear my prayer. Twofold, egg-born, Lucifer, and wandering through the air, bull roarer, glory in the golden wings, from whom the race of gods immortal springs. Erechpaeus, celebrated power, ineffable, occult, all-shining flower. 'Tis thine the darksome mist to pure the sight, all-spreading splendor, pure and holy light. Hence Phanes, called the glory of the sky, on waving pinions through the whirl you fly. Priapus, dark-eyed splendor, thee I sing, genial, all-prudent, ever-blessed King, with joyful aspects, on these rites divine and holy consecration, propitious shine." The Orphics were some of the earliest to produce what would be described as monotheistic tendencies, meaning all of these gods that came from Phanes down to Priapus, the son of Dionysus, are all one spirit, and they're all within the same bosom, which brings me to my last section, Dionysus and Christianity. Clement of Alexandria says, "God in the bosom is a countersign of the mysteries of Sabazius to the adepts." Clement reports, "This is a snake passed through the bosom of the initiates." The Orphic egg, with a snake wrapped around it, was a symbol of the Orphic god, Dionysus giving his inspiration to Orpheus. Phanes the firstborn, and Dionysus the last prince who gives birth to Priapus. And what Clement of Alexandria is saying in this context, Clement is comparing Jesus as the Son of God being in the bosom of God, the Father, as the Phrygians believed the same about Dionysus and Sabazius, being God the Father and Son in the bosom. Phrygia was a booming region for early Christianity. During this time, Sabazius had evolved into a more Middle Platonist, monotheistic form called THEOS HYPSISTOS. The Hypsistarians are the group that lived in Cappadocia and Phrygia, who worshipped this god with no images in the temple, and he was represented by an eagle. The eagle, as his symbol, does have roots to its earliest forms. Gregory of Nazianzus was once a Hypsistarian initiate who converted to Christianity when he married Saint Nonna, and sure enough, he was known as the Trinitarian Theologian who contributed major contributions to the idea of the Trinity that became the Christian godhead. To the Phrygians, Dionysus and Zeus were one, Zeus Sabazius, with a Saturnian spirit that binded them together. These ideas are heavily influenced by Zoroastrian theology and Plato. The Chaldean Oracles, with some passages attributed to Zoroaster, Pythagoras, others to Plato, and the rest attributed to Neo-Platonist Theurgists that lived in the court of Marcus Aurelius, has the following passage: "All things are governed by the Father, in the bosoms of the intelligible triad." And again, the Father mingled every spirit from this triad. Parmenides said, "The summit of intelligibles is the intelligible triad, containing in itself the cause and essence of all triads. Thus, he who knows himself knows all things, as Zoroaster first asserted in his Gathas, and afterwards Plato in the first Alcibiades. All things are the progeny of one fire, one divine nature. The monad is there first, where the paternal monad subsists. The monad is extended, which generates two, the Logos, the Father-begotten light. It is the operator, the giver of life-bearing fire. It fills the vivific bosom of the angel Hecate, the angel love, Eros, who first leaped forth from intellect, clothing fire bound together with fire. The father Saturn has hastily withdrawn himself from all connection of matter. The duad sits with Jupiter and glitters with intellectual sections, together with the power of governing all things.
Dionysus, or Bacchus, was called by the Chaldeans Yao in the Phoenician tongue and is frequently called Sabaoth, such as the one who is above the seven poles, called Demiurge.
The triad, the Demiurgos, made the whole world from fire, water, earth, and all nourishing air. What the Pythagoreans intended to signify by monad, duad, and triad. Bound, Saturn, infinite, Jupiter, and that which is mixed from both, united, Dionysus. We also have texts from the early Christians in the pre-church era that cite Pythagoras and use similar concepts for Jesus and God the Father. Now, Pythagoras declared that an unbegotten monad was the principle of the universe and the parent of the dyad and of all the other numbers. And he says that the monad is the father of the dyad, and the dyad the mother of all engendered things, and a bearer of things begotten. Zarathustra, also the teacher of Pythagoras, calls of the one father, but the two mother, for the dyad has come into being from a monad, according to Pythagoras, and the monad is masculine at first, but the dyad female and second, similar to Adam and Eve. From the dyad again, as Pythagoras says, comes the triad, Hippolytus. Keeping steadfast and present to the Pythagorean doctrine of the beginning and remembering what others teach, say that he is one, without spouse, without female, and in need of naught. At the beginning nothing was begotten, but the Father was alone, unbegotten, having neither place nor time, nor counselor, nor any other things that by any figure of speech could be understood as essence. But he was alone and solitary, as they say, and resting alone within himself. And when he was filled with fruit, he saw fit to beget, and bring forth the most beautiful and perfect thing he had within himself. For he did not love to be alone, for he was all love, and love is not love unless there be something to be loved. Then the Father himself engendered, as he was alone, mind and truth, that is, a dyad, which became the lady, and beginning and mother of all aeons, reckoned by them as being within the pleroma. But Nous and Aletheia having been projected by the Father, a fruitful projection from the fruitful, imitating the Father, projected also the Word, Logos, and the life, Zoe. Valentinus, who lived from 100 to 180, was an extremely popular Christian theologian who was once a follower of THEOS, who was the woman who traveled the world with Paul. He was also a second candidate for the Bishop of Rome. After Pope Hyginus died, he lost a narrow vote to the next pope, Anyctus. Being only 2 students removed from Paul himself, he taught that God the Father, the Logos, and Zoe were a trinity. This type of theology is certainly present among the Phrygian worshippers of Sabazius. Attis, the Phrygian eunuch, who died and rises through the blessings of Cybele and Sabazius, was also equated with Dionysus in several sources. Vercori was carried off by Pluto, that is, the sun going down beneath the earth at seed time. But Dionysus begins to sprout according to the conditions of the power which, while young, is hidden beneath the earth, yet produces fine fruits, and is an ally of the power in the blossom symbolized by Attis, and of the cutting of ripening corn symbolized by Adonis, Porphyry. Clement of Alexandria said, "For those 2 identical fratricides, having abstracted this box in which the phallus of Bacchus was deposited, took it to Etruria, dealers in honorable wares truly. They lived there as exiles, employing themselves in communicating the precious teaching of their superstition, and presenting phallus symbols in the box for the Tyrrhenian to worship. And some will have it, not improbably, that this reason Dionysus was called Attis, because he was mutilated." The unity among these sons of God was very popular by the 1st century. Jesus is portrayed in the Gospels as a new Dionysus, saying in his parables, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman," a dethroning of Dionysus as the vine. He also performs miracles making wine from water, which was a legend that once was told about Dionysus. Pausanias says, "The Andrians too assert that every year at the feast of Dionysus, wine flows of its own accord from the sanctuary." Again, in Book 6, he relates, "Between the marketplace and the Menios in the city of Elis is an old theater and a shrine of Dionysus. The image is the work of Praxiteles. Of the gods, the Eleans worship Dionysus with the greatest reverence, and they assert that the god attends their festival, the Thaia. 3 jars are brought into the building by the priests and sent down empty in the presence of the citizens and of the strangers who may chance to be in a country. The doors of the buildings are sealed by the priests themselves and by any others who may be so inclined. On the morrow, they are allowed to examine the seals, and on going into the building, they find the pots of jars filled with wine." A miracle. At the wedding of Cana, Jesus taking water and turning it into wine would have immediately caught the attention of anybody of the time period who was aware of the Dionysian. The ideas of a trinity or a triad are completely Platonic and are much older than Christianity. The idea that Saturn, Zeus, and Dionysus are one, flanked by an army of angels, is something that we see in Christianity with Jesus the Father and the Holy Spirit. It's even Christians themselves in the 2nd century that we see evidence of them doing these comparisons, noticing the similarities between Jesus and Dionysus or Jesus and Attis. In fact, a 2nd century Christian called the Nicene preacher sang a hymn about Jesus that went like this: "Whether blessed child of Kronos or son of Zeus, Dionysus, or of great Rhea, hail Attis, morning star of Rhea. Assyrians call thee desired Adonis, all Egypt Osiris, the wisdom of Hellas, men's heavenly horn. The Samothracians call you Adamas, the Haemonians Corybas, the Phrygians call you Papa sometimes, and times again the dead god, or unfruitful, or Apolos, or green-reaped wheat ear, or the fruit which Amygdalos brought forth, man piper, Jesus Christ. And so the Dionysian elements are so widespread throughout the time that they evolve into new gods and cults throughout the world. Justin Martyr understood how much these impacted the Jesus story and wrote, "The devil who taught these mysteries to the Greeks in order to mock Jesus." The devils, accordingly, when they heard these prophetic words, said that Bacchus was the son of Jupiter and gave out that he was the discoverer of the vine, and they number wine or the donkey among his mysteries. And they taught that, having been torn into pieces, he ascended into heaven. Justin, Apology. See, Justin understood that these symbols are Dionysian, and that's why he's the first apologist, because what he's saying is completely in defense of his own faith that he has political reasons for. Dionysus worship continued in the Eleusinian mysteries up until the 5th century of the Common Era. From what began in the Bronze Age Mycenaean period, the Christians could find no other way to replace them other than to co-opt them somehow. A legend was created about a devotee of the mysteries named Demetrius, who was visited by Demeter in a dream and told to worship Jesus and convert the Eleusinian mysteries to a church, which actually happened, and that church is still there today. Orpheus, the high priest of Dionysus, also had many legends written about him by Christians that make him into a saint. And in the oldest Christian catacombs, we can see Orpheus playing his lyre near Jesus and Mary. Orpheus is also present in the Sibylline Oracles from the 1st and 2nd century Christian Sibylists, showing the close proximity of Orphism, Judaism, and Christianity. And for these reasons, Dionysus is the most widespread god in history. You have thus attained true gnosis.